Welcome to the Red Gauge. I'm your host, Kyle. Today we're joined by a man who hopefully you already know, Coach Leo Totten. So, Coach, you've been around for a long time. You've been, if I remember this correctly, I'm going to say 2 Olympic teams. You've
Yeah.
been the lead or one of the USA coaches.
Yeah.
Three Pan Am teams, 5 or 6 world teams, 4 or 5 world teams,
Yeah.
something like that. So I've seen your name in the training space for a long time now, but can you tell us like how you got started in sport?
Okay, here we go. That was way back.
Way back.
Way back. I've always had interest in sports, but when I first started, I was like just a really little guy, but I was very interested and tried to do everything, football, basketball, you name it. And I was just 12 years old and I got my first set of weights from York Barbell. And some of the other podcasts have heard this story, so I hope people aren't kind of going over this again. But it just does kind of tell you my background pretty much started with nothing. Okay. And I look at people's facilities and their coaches and stuff. There's so many things that are going on now that back then I basically taught myself how to snatch and clean and jerk. Because when I got my first set of weights, I was, eighth grade, I was like 83 pounds. I was just a wee little guy. But I got my first set of weights from York Barbell that at the time, now this is way back,
Uh-huh.
that was York was the mecca of weightlifting. Bob Hoffman and York Barbell, they would bring people in, the best lifters in the country, paid their way, gave them jobs. It was pretty much made it a profession for them. But I saw them training there. Bob Benarski and Rick Holbrook and Fred Lau was there. They brought in just a ton of good athletes. And I'm just this little pipsqueak watching these guys lift. I'm going, you know what? I think I'd really like to do that. So I just basically watched them, got Strength and Health magazine, and just learned off of that. And I really miss Strength and Health magazine, by the way. That was classic, and that's how I taught myself how to lift. So, everything just kind of prospered from there. I mean, I had a high school. Yeah, I played soccer and wrestled and gymnastics and did a little bit of everything in high school. I wrestled for a couple years in college and played a little soccer. It made me a better athlete. And as I kept focusing on weightlifting, I just kind of kept getting bigger and bigger and stronger and stronger. And the sport just kind of took hold of me. And I did some crazy things growing up that, I look back at it now. I mean, something as simple as when I was a freshman in college, I was, again, working by myself. And there was a weightlifting meet in Philadelphia. And my school, I went to Westchester University near Philadelphia. It was a 30-minute drive into town, and we had to be out of our dorm that we're in because they were doing some cleaning or renovating or whatever. And they said we couldn't be in there, and it was around Christmas holiday. And so I said, well, I didn't have any money for a hotel. I'll just drive to the meet, park in front of the location, downtown Philly. And of course, I'm, a stupid 18-year-old. I didn't know any better. Sleep in my car, okay, because I couldn't afford a hotel. Lifted in the meet, didn't do real well,
I was
but
gonna say that must have been a hell of a performance.
did not do real well. But I totaled though, and then ended up driving home and just things like that I would do just because I didn't know any better. And
Hmm.
some of the facilities I trained in over the years, I mean, unheated garages and you name it, just dirt floor garages and things. Things that nowadays people will look at that and go, "My God, you must be crazy," because now facilities and equipment and everything are so much better. Uh, yeah, so it was quite the experience, but it did help me in a lot of ways. So I owe a lot to weightlifting. That's one of the reasons why I really like to give back as much as I can.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
could go on and on. I mean, how much time do we have?
I mean, we have as much time as you have. I'll publicly wear the burden for this. I'm super late for the second attempt to record it, so I owe you an apology. I'm very grateful that you
That's okay.
you
That's
stayed on
okay.
and waited for me to get here. It's been a hectic, crazy couple weeks.
I understand completely. I was in a high school situation like you are for many years, and I know how many hours you put in, and so I respect you for that because I understand totally.
Well, and it is a crazy thing. Like, tonight I got out of my last meeting at 5:15, and I thought like, well, I'll make it home in time. It'll be no problem. And then it's the one, haven't had any traffic in town in 10 years, and all of a sudden cars are stopped. So it's like, crazy. So yeah, I always love those stories. I know like it's funny that you mentioned the Strength and Health magazine. My coach got started on Charles Atlas. He was a little before your time even.
No, not a whole lot before.
Not a whole lot, a little
Not a
bit.
whole lot before.
And there's
The
all the kind of
98
like
pound weakling that the bully kicked sand in his face
yeah, yeah,
at the
yeah,
beach.
yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's been kind of like there's been moments like there was a little moment kind of in the early 90s to get like published content, especially out of like, like uh the Russian school of weightlifting, and then of course there was like T Nation in the early 2000s that was really big when we were all shifting to online. Have you like in your time, do you ever like find things that you wish would stick around or wish would grow more than they have? Like, do you feel like it's in a pretty good spot? Like, so there's a lot of diversification in where people can go for information now, right? So like, what do you recommend to people for like where they go find their information if they want to, if they want to learn more and they're addicted to it like you were or I was?
Well, I think you bring up something that is pretty important that I think people should go back to if they haven't already. The old Russian manuals that
Hmm.
I mean, that I did a lot of my studying off that as I was getting into the sport, beyond Strength and Health magazine. And I still have a lot of the manuals and studied those, as far as training, volume and intensity and all the research that they've done. And a lot of that stuff holds true today. And I know there's a lot of new stuff out there, and the internet is, all the latest updated stuff and stuff. But I get accused of being old school. But old school stuff works. That's the bottom line. It's been backed by research. It's been backed by experience of athletes doing really well with it, and it just stands the test of time. And one of the things I always tell people, because I do a lot of clinics and seminars and all, I said that whenever I do my clinic, I say, look, you're not going to become an expert by what we're talking about here, but you're gonna increase your knowledge a little bit more and become a little bit more of an expert, but not totally an expert. I've been around for 50 years. I don't consider myself an expert by any means because I know some really, really smart people out there, and I look at myself and oh my God, I don't know anything compared to these guys. What I do tell them though, I said, I would like to think that it at least makes you smarter, that when you go on the internet, there's a lot of really good stuff on the internet, but there's a lot of crap too. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't even make any sense. And it hasn't been backed by research. It hasn't been promoted by quality, experienced people. The experiences that has over time proven to work. Just because somebody markets themselves very well and they put out some idea that may not make a whole lot of sense, well, if you're not very educated, you don't have a very good filter system to look at that stuff and say, no, that's crap. A lot of people, if you don't know what you don't know.
Hmm.
So a lot of times, people go on the internet, and because people can market themselves very well, but he doesn't know any better, they'll see that and say, oh, that must be a good way to train. So they'll stick that in their training program, where probably is not the best thing to do, you know? So
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. I think go back to the resources. There's a ton of resources out there. There's a lot of literature. There's a lot of researchers out there, and old school works. I mean, just time and time again.
Hmm. Yeah. So yeah, it is a funny thing that you see like everything that's old is new again. Like if you're in this for long enough, I've been training for 23 years and 12 months, 23 years, 11 months and 27 days.
You keep track of it way better than I do, I can tell you.
Well, mine was easy because it was just about New Year's when I started. So it was just
Oh,
coming
there
back
you go.
from winter
Okay,
break as a high school kid. So it
that
was
makes
like
sense.
January or January 4th or whatever. So it was easy to keep track of. And I got a calendar right in front of me so I can do the rest of the math. But just in that time, I've seen the, some stuff fall out of favor and come back, probably on three different cycles already.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Well, and I even found the same thing. You teach and you're at a high school thing, and I don't know if you've seen this, but I noticed over the years that if something is new educationally, all right, in the school system, it's like we have to jump on the bandwagon right away. It's the newest, latest, best thing going on,
mhm,
and and then a year later, it's like, well, the funding didn't work out, and that didn't work out as well. So let's go back to what we did. So this happened two or three times, and after a while, you become almost cynical. It's like,
mhm,
All right, here we go again, something new. And it still goes back, you got to add, you got to write, you got to read, and just you can be as fancy as you want, but the bottom line is you still got to get the basics. And I think that's one of the things that young coaches and athletes, they try to jump ahead way beyond where they are. And instead of really working on the basics and getting those basics down pat to where it's automatic, then you get fancy on top of that. And I really see this. I have a lot of wrestling background, and I see that where, when I was a wrestler myself, and when I coached wrestling for many years, I just found that the more you just do the repetition after repetition after same moves over and over,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's where the athletes have to understand that it might be boring, but you got to fight your way through that, because you need to do things over the basics over and over and over till they become automatic. And really, it's the same thing with weightlifting for that matter. You know, trying to get too fancy, you end up forgetting the basics and trying to skip steps, so to speak. And it's a progression and it takes time. And that, we're always in a hurry, the instant gratification. We want success right away. I think we need to just think long term and, take your time, work on the basics, and just work it that way. And sometimes we're in too big of a hurry.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a message that you hear like routinely from pretty much anybody who's achieved anything is like if you want to be great, it's going to take 10 years before you're knocking on the doorstep, right? Like
Yeah.
you just
Yeah.
it's they're all developmental sports. It takes time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I know I'm real big on the weight room as a tool for every sport, right? And I get a lot of pushback from kids because they're like, it's boring, right? Like how many times do I got to do a squat and a bench and a deadlift and like just the basic kind of meat and potatoes things that we do in the weight room. And I'm like, a lot. Yeah, you just keep going. There's like it keeps paying. Don't worry about it. You just gotta grind those gears a little bit sometimes.
Well, and that to me, that's what a good athlete will do. They're willing to put up with that repetition because it does, and it takes discipline to do that, and it takes a good coach to still motivate them to do that.
Hmm.
Find different ways of doing. Okay,
Yeah.
anybody can do a squat. Well, how about if we'll do some speed squats, we'll do some eccentrics, we'll do some five stops on the way down.
Hmm.
We'll just vary it depending on, what are you trying to do? You're trying to build strength, you're trying to build power. It's just there's different ways of skinning the cat, so to speak. And even though you're doing squats, you're still doing them. You can do them in a variety of ways. Sit in the bottom for 3 seconds, then come back up. Just so you can work strength and you can work the movements. That's where a good coach motivates, and you're still doing the same movement, but you're doing it in different ways, trying to accomplish different things.
Yeah, yeah. Variety is the spice of life, right? And it doesn't take much, like you said. Like it can be just a little bit, and it feels like a new thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So you got your start in sport. You were, doing the high school thing and coaching for a while. I guess your program that you're working now is mostly support for coaches. Like you guys are training coaches to be better coaches.
That's kind of shifted to be my main emphasis right now, because for years coaching athletes and not coaching coaches as much, but and it was maybe I'd say a 70-30 ratio, and now it's switched where it's more 70-30 coaching coaches, because I'm still coaching athletes. We still have, heck, we have the American Open finals, or what's it called now, the virus final, weightlifting finals. I still call them the AO finals. Like that's how we get used to that new name. But it's going to be a huge thing, and it's coming up this weekend. I don't know when this podcast is going to be out there. Right now, we're December 1st. So this weekend, and my team, East Coast Gold, we have I think it's like 28 lifters competing, but we also have like 8 coaches as well. So that's really what my team started out as. Years ago, I actually started the team in 1992. So we've been around for what's that, 33 years now. And it started out with just me coaching a couple athletes, and eventually it ended up being, well, there was a lot of athletes at different spots that needed coaches. So what I did was I went to those different areas and developed coaches at those areas where they were. And so now we have what we call satellite centers or affiliates all around the East Coast. So we have, I think, something like 8 or 10 really active ones right now. And each one has a coach, and they pretty much follow the same strategy of how we deal with our athletes, our relationships, how we coach them, our strategies that we use. And so we're all on the same wavelength, and we're all under the same team umbrella. And it's been a really successful type thing. And I've always been the head coach and the CEO. And right now, I've kind of moved a little bit more toward where our main center, right? The main center was always pretty much my house. And I would do, send out newsletters and deal with hotels for national meets and stuff. I would do that on my own. Well, now Phil Sabatini, a lot of your audience, I'm sure, knows Phil really well. He was one of my lifters that he had a great career as a weightlifter, just really, really good guy, and he developed into a really good coach that we had worked with him not only as an athlete but as a coach. So now he runs our main satellite center in Virginia Beach, and he's taken over as my associate head coach and president. And so he and I run the team, but he does more the logistics and all. Like, for instance, this meet coming up, he's the one that organized our phone chat system and set up all the hotels and doing all that stuff. So I've kind of gotten away from coaching as many athletes as I used to. I still coach, I think, 15 or 20, but not nearly what I was before. But I'm
Hmm.
trying to kind of delegate more and, bring up these young coaches to continue doing the same things that we've been doing for years. And it's been a really successful program, and we want to see it keep going. And getting guys like Phil, Tom Dewar in Pittsburgh. We have a satellite center in Dallas with Amanda Whiting and her husband Chris. So we have, just a bunch of good young coaches coming up. And so that's pretty much what I've been doing now more in the last few years, developing these coaches and bringing along athletes that way as well. So it's been a pretty good system for us.
Yeah. We've talked on the show a lot with like other guests about what makes a good athlete, right? And the kind of the same things pop up all the time, right? Like part of it is just having that obsession, like being willing to sleep in their car before a weightlifting meet,
Yeah.
you know. Some of it's like being coachable, right? Kids like it's great when kids have talent. It's better when they listen, right? We've talked about, having the drive and the dedication to just do the things that need to be done, do the work. What's your checklist of what makes a good coach? Like what are the traits that you're always trying to push on and lean on and, like provide mentorship for young coaches?
That's a really good question because, again, we could go on and on all night
Yeah,
for
yeah.
that.
I got all night.
Yeah. I think one of the things I think that's been pretty much our motto as all the coaches that I've worked with and everybody part of our team, and I think Phil Sabatini maybe even came up with this. It's like if all of our coaches do this, and what that is that we try to do the right thing for the right reason with the right people, you
Hmm.
can't go wrong.
Yeah.
And so we try to do more than just coach weightlifting. We try to hang out with good people. We try to avoid drama. We try to avoid butt heads, as I call them. We try to just always do the right thing, and everything just kind of rolls that way. And so, but like the qualities we want in our coaches, they got to be patient because and think long term. I think a lot of times you get especially young coaches that, they have a little success with one lifter. That might be just that diamond in the rough guy, that or girl that shows up. It's like, all right, this is the real deal. And coach them a little bit. They're going to probably do well no matter what that coach does. Okay. So all of a sudden the coach thinks, hey, I'm an expert. I developed this lifter to this point. Well, it's like, did you really do that? Or was it them just kind of, you're just kind of hanging on their coattails?
Yeah,
So
when Mark Henry shows up in your gym, you're a good coach whether you did anything right or
exactly,
not.
exactly. I mean, you have to really mess up to mess him up, right?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I can tell you some stories about Mark Henry too as well.
Done.
We can do that. Remind me, we'll come back to that.
Okay, I'm
Um,
gonna.
yeah, but no, I mean, you still have to have the athlete that they want it as much as you do. And that's the thing, and I've always said that, look, I don't care who it is, at what level they are. If they work hard, I'll work with whoever. I mean, they could be, just barely starting, or they could be top level. As long as they work hard, I'm working with. I know some coaches, they only want the top level athletes. I just want hard workers. I want coachable athletes, and because you never know where they're going to go. Okay. I mean, if you would have looked at me when I was 12 years old and said, you're going to be a national caliber weightlifter and a coach, I'm like, and, people would have said, there is no way that, 12-year-old kid, 83 pounds, he's so weak, he couldn't pee a hole in the snow. You like that line, by the way?
Yeah, yeah, I do.
And that's the thing. I mean, it's really hard to measure heart. You know what I mean? So this is why how many times have you had a kid come up and say, "Hey, coach, I want to make an Olympic team. Can you work with me and help me make the Olympics?" I'm like, "Okay, I've heard that before." I
Uh-huh.
said, "But I'll work with you. We'll take you as far as you can go." Now, sometimes they'll continue working and they end up being a success story. I mean, not necessarily making the Olympics, but taking themselves as far as they can go. Other times you see somebody with a lot of aggressiveness, they're ready to go, and 2 weeks later they're gone. You have that. But again, I'll work with anybody as long as they're willing to work, and I'll keep them going. I don't care what level they are. They could be a master lifter. I work with a lot of master lifters. Not that they're ever going to make an Olympic team, but they've got the good heart. They're very coachable, and I love working with masters. I was never I was never going to be a master lifter myself. It didn't intrigue me to go beyond. My lifting career I stopped at the 1984 Olympic trials, actually, when they had Olympic trials, and that was my last competition. And I was still in really good shape and all, but people say, "Oh, you should lift as a master." I'm like, I have no desire to be out there doing 50% of what I had done before. It doesn't thrill me at all. But there's a lot of masters, and there's a ton of them out there. They love what they're doing. Their goals are their own goals. I'll work with them 100%. I love what they do. And
Well, how many
matter of
times
fact, our team, we have a ton of master lifters. So that just proves the point.
Yeah. And how many times have you heard from an athlete that like, it seems like everybody has a competitive window in their life. Like it's something that you do, and then once you're done, it's time to move on to grow a little and do the next phases, Like how many times have you talked to an athlete who's made it to the trials or, a Pan Am Games or a world team or something, right? They've done something really exceptional, and then they just kind of lose their fire about it because like, you climb Mount Everest, and do you get ready for the next Mount Everest, or do you go back and teach?
Well,
And
I see that a good bit, but at the same time, it's really cool to see not only, as a senior lifter, they might have success, then they continue on as a master lifter. But I also see a lot of these lifters that were at the top level, they become really good coaches. So, I really enjoy the fact that and appreciate the fact that there's so many top level lifters that they don't just disappear. A
mhm.
lot of them do. Life gets in the way, but it's so cool to see a lot of them staying in the sport and becoming either master lifters or really good coaches. And we see a lot of that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of kind of just the natural human arc. Like once you master something, it's time to share it. It's time to give back. And I think what happens a lot of times is that people's when they climb Everest is a lot different times. Like maybe you fall in love with weightlifting when you're 41, and then, your Everest hits when you're 48 or 50 or something, right? And then after that it's time to do the coaching and giving back.
Well, you gotta find whatever is a passion for you.
Mhm.
And like for me, my passion has been my weightlifting career as a lifter, but also as a coach, as a strength and conditioning coach, as well as a weightlifting coach. But my emphasis has kind of changed where I've always had a passion for family and all the things. So now I'm able to do more of those things now that, you know how busy your high school thing is. Well, I was doing that and doing all my lifting on top of it. Well,
Mhm.
that's one of the main reasons why I stopped my competitive time as a lifter, so I could spend more time coaching. But it also gave me a lot more flexibility and time to work with my family.
Mhm.
So, you know, interests change, passions change. My passion for lifting is still there, but I have passion for other things as well. So I just, you kind of you got to find out what works best for you.
Yeah. I really like that, do the right thing at the right time for the right reasons because it actually demands a lot from coaches. You do it, doing the right thing not only demands like a high degree of conscientiousness, like you have to be thinking about, what's good for your athletes as humans, right? Like what they need to hear and understand in order to grow. But it also requires that you are like investing yourself in understanding your sport and, like what your interventions are and how you apply them and all those kinds of things. So I like that as a key. There's a lot to it. Like unpacking that could take a few years, but it's a really great framework, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's where I tend to look at my athletes in a more holistic manner. I try to take everything into consideration. I don't just when I do programming for athletes, I try to make it as individualized as possible where I take everything into consideration that is going on in their life. Okay. I mean, if they're working 60 hours a week and have 3 kids and, they have a stressful job, we're not going to train them 6 days a week. We're not going to
Hmm.
go, all out. We'll drop down to 3 or 4 days a week, figure out what works best for them and manipulate around what their situation is. Because, unless you're a full-time athlete, we're Americans where we have a lot of other stuff going on. So
Hmm.
to try to just only focus on their weightlifting, I think that's not doing them a very good service. And I think we need to consider them as a human, as you
Hmm.
said, and as a whole person. And then from there, the weightlifting is part of it. It's not the end of the world. Okay. If you're striving for an Olympic team and you're right up there, maybe. Okay, that's your focus. But I mean, come on, everybody else, it's a big part of what we do, and we really want to do well. But at the same time, we have to take into consideration all the other stuff going on in their life.
Hmm. Yeah, even in the realm of our sport, right? Like, so I did my first strongman competition 2 or 3 months ago, and I'll go and compete at nationals now. And like, even in the sport, like just doing training for that, the training part of it is not even the biggest piece because I've got the sleep and the nutrition and the, stress management and all. So like even if you were just doing weightlifting or just doing powerlifting or whatever, even the training piece of it isn't the most involved portion.
Yeah, and I always joke around. I said, the 1 hour that you spend on the platform isn't as important as the 23 hours you spend off the platform.
Hmm.
And so, there's so many other factors that go into it. And I think sometimes we're so focused on, the sets and reps and, the best way of training. What about all the other stuff that really makes that work? And I
Hmm.
think a good coach, that's what they'll do. They'll look at the full picture of what that person is all about. This is why it drives me crazy when a lot of times I hear of athletes that they get these generic, what I call generic workouts online, where they'll find a coach that they're selling programs for whatever amount of money and making some money off the deal, but it's not really individualized for that person's situation. So I think they're okay, but I always look at, you got good, better, and best. And if somebody's going to pay me to do programming for them, they're going to get the best from me. They're not just going to get a mediocre generic program that I just kind of pull out of the filing cabinet and say, here you go. That's not how you, to me.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, even if you are, gonna take the like a approach where you try to discover what their strengths and weaknesses are and what they can do, you still need to start out inventorying what their history is and, what
Absolutely.
kind of injuries they got and what kind of training they've been doing and all that other stuff, right? Because if you're just gonna be like, hey, we're gonna do a asynchronous 5 day split or whatever, you're, throwing coins in a wishing well.
Exactly. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what's the like does it feel because you've had a very very successful coaching career and you've coached at a lot of different levels. What do you think are like the things that you need to learn as a coach to go from like the high school level to like a national team to like a world stage? Like what are the I like asking people what their mistakes were, but I don't always want to put people on the spot, like like I know I made lots of mistakes when I got into training and coaching and there was really valuable like lessons to learn from it. So but like what is it that you are when you get new coaches, are there like things that you find that you're consistently talking to new coaches about as opposed to coaches who have a little more experience or come from more successful programs?
Well, I don't think there's really any one answer for that because everybody comes to you with a different background and a different way of looking at things. And I just try to tell them that, get to know your athlete, find out what they're all about. And uh, I have a tendency to I tend to study uh, elite anybody. Okay, elite coaches, elite businessmen, anybody who's a success, and from the coaching standpoint, I look at, even other sports, Mike Krzyzewski in basketball, Vince Lombardi in football, John Wooden in basketball. And then there's a lot of leadership guys that I follow. Heck, I'm such a geek, I even subscribe to Success Magazine, okay?
Hmm.
But, anything that you can constantly learn from people who've been there, done that, you know, instead of, trying to work your way through it on your own. Why not find somebody, and I'll talk about my mentorship program here in a few minutes. Find someone who's been there, done that, and learn from them. Not necessarily be exactly like them, but find out what works for them that you can maybe apply to what you're doing. Um, I'm still a huge Green Bay Packers fan. And people say, well, wait a minute, you're from Pennsylvania. Why would you be a Packers fan? Well, way back in the day, in the early 60s, Jim Taylor was a big running back for them. He was a fullback. He was like 220 pounds and he had big, thick thighs and just a real powerful runner. And this is when I was like a 12-year-old kid just watching this stuff. And I'm going, man, that guy's really strong, real powerful. Found out that he was an LSU guy and they had one of the earliest strength conditioning programs utilizing weightlifting. And so I found this out and I just studied him. I studied all what he was doing. So he became actually, unbeknownst to him, one of my mentors along the way because I just followed him and I was just a little guy. And that was one of the reasons why I really got involved in weightlifting was because of him. But anyway, the coach at the time of the Green Bay Packers, they won the first two Super Bowls back in the day. Vince Lombardi was their head coach and he was a real disciplinarian and he was like, and I just studied him, all the things he did. Even though he was a real strict disciplinarian, he was also soft at heart, and he was very fair back in the early '60s when there was some racial bigotry going on. He had black guys that they were part of the team. The hotels didn't allow black guys in there, and he insisted. He said, these guys, they're part of our team. We're going to go elsewhere. That sort of thing. So these morals and values that he had, and he was a really religious guy, and all these things going on. I wasn't him. I didn't have his exact personality, but I took a lot of his values and the way he did things, and I try to do that with a lot of different coaches out there that have success. And I think that's one of the things that has made me who I am. I'm still me, but I'm taking a lot of those things and incorporating it. And I think a lot of young coaches coming up, that's what I advise them to do. I said, just, hang out with good coaches, talk to them. When I go to conferences and I go to the NSCA conferences and the CSCCA and the NHSSCA, I go to all those conferences. I listen to the speakers because you can get a lot of information from those guys because well, here I am. I'm an old guy and I'm still learning. I certainly don't know it all. And I tell people that all the time. Keep learning, don't stop. And the best part though isn't just listening to them at the lectures that they give, but it's the in-between times when, you can sit down with them, have a coffee with them, just hang out and talk and networking and that is the most invaluable thing. So go to these things. I tell the young coaches, go to these conferences and all, talk to these coaches, find out what they're all about. And you never know. I always say, look, the more you know, the more you don't know, but also the more people you know, sometimes it'll get you a job. It may not be what you know, but who you know. So the more that happens, and that's one of the things I try to tell people. Say, look, anytime I do a clinic or whatever, I'm now part of your network. So anytime you have any questions or anything that I can help you with, just let me know. And if I don't have the answer, I probably know someone who does have the answer, so I can, move you forward to contact them. So that whole networking thing, I think, is a big part of what young coaches should do.
Yeah, I'm gonna draw a parallel to like being an athlete. So, my coaching experience, right, is mostly working with high school athletes and they don't all fall in love with the weight room, right? Like they fall in love with
Mhm.
their sport and they want to do their sport and doing the weight room is kind of like paying dues or, it's like something they have to do, right? It's work. And lots of times they do fall in love with the weight room eventually and have a really good time with it. I think that there might be a parallel there with like coaching and mentorship. Like you love your sport and you love working with the kids. The mentorship is how you grow, right? It's like how you continue to develop your practice. Kind of like, the weight room is how you continue to get stronger and faster and, more powerful and everything, right? So I can co-sign that strongly enough. Like every little bit of coaching that I know, I got from somebody else. Like somebody I got mentorship from other people who were supportive and answered my questions and told me when I'd done something dumb and all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, can't advise it strong enough. So what is your mentorship program?
We've been doing this now for about five, I think this is the fifth year we're doing it, and it's been very successful. And what we find is that there's a lot of young coaches coming out that they're experiencing a lot of the ups and downs that I did and my other mentor coaches that we have part of this. And we've been through a lot of bumps in the road, so to speak. So one of the things that I found is that when you have to go through things with like through trial and error, it takes
Hmm.
time.
Yeah.
And if you have a mentor that can kind of, if you have problems, well, let's smooth that out for you. Let's fix this. Things that we try to cover that doesn't necessarily get covered in their undergrad programs
Hmm.
and things that they'll experience in the real world. And because, I mean, you can only do so much in your undergrad, even your master's programs, there's only so much you can cover. But in the real world, you come up with issues every day. So it just takes time to fix those things through trial and error. So through our mentorship program, that's our goal, is to try to kind of smooth that out and save the time so you become a better coach a lot quicker.
Hmm.
And so we developed this online program. It's got 36 modules, and it's broken down into three groups of 12 modules each. One is on coaching theory, so to speak, and we talk about relationships. We talk about developing a value system, really setting out what your values are all about, your coaching philosophy, that sort of thing. Of course, we talk about technical development, things like we have modules on snatch, clean and jerk, but also sprints, plyometrics, strongman training, things like that. And then we have some 12 of the modules on training theory, where we talk about periodization, we talk about biomechanics and strength development, hypertrophy development, things like that. So we try to cover a wide range of topics, and the way we set it up is we have it's a 6-month program, and we cover two of the 36 modules each week, and you have a mentor that works with you, and they meet once a week, and they not only discuss the modules of the week, but also they discuss anything in their particular situation. Say they're in a gym or a sports performance place or a physical therapy lab or whatever. They'll talk about some of the personal problems that they're coming across, throughout. And so the mentor can talk them through some of that stuff. So we do that for 3 weeks out of the month. And then on the fourth week, then we have what we call a full cohort, where all of the mentees and the mentors and myself, we get together and we have like just a round table and discuss anything throughout. We can discuss any upcoming modules. We can discuss any modules that had happened before. It's pretty much an open book. We'll spend an hour or two just talking about things that come up in their situation. Again, one of the reasons why we like to do this over the years, I've been very fortunate, and the other mentors that are part of our program, again, excellent coaches. What we found is that over the years, we've had excellent mentors that have helped us along the way, and it's just a way for us to give back. And
Hmm.
it's one of those things that it's a very rewarding thing for us. So, we get as much out of it as they do, to be honest with you, just because we appreciate all the good people that have worked with us through the years. I can go on and on with all the mentors. Heck, even Jim Taylor from the Packers, he didn't even know he was my mentor, and he
Uh-huh.
ended up being.
He was
But
working for free.
Exactly, yeah. So it's just it's a very rewarding thing, and there's some other mentorship things out there, but I think ours is a real personal thing, and it's one of the things that we've done for 5 years now, and I'm hoping it goes on for a while now, but we really enjoy it.
Yeah, I really like that as a tool for coaches. I know, I love like training theory. That's kind of like my bread and butter. That's the spot where I'm useful is like the technical stuff. And I still remember I had a kid who was on the powerlifting team for the few years that I was there coaching that um just would not go up a weight class, and it was driving me insane. Like he was trying to make big cuts for every meet, and it was not a fun time, and it wasn't, good for him or anything. And like just as like kind of living on an island, just banging my head against the wall, trying to figure out like, how do you have this conversation where it's productive when like I got all the information from every study ever downloaded in my head, and none of them are about dealing with a stubborn personality about a weight class. So like having
That's
being able.
exactly the type of thing we would talk about.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So having that resource, the amount of movement you could make with with your personnel, with your athletes could be huge if you can get through those stubborn hurdles.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's one of the things that that would be exactly what we're talking about.
Mhm. Yeah. So 6 months they do the program for, and then when they leave, I assume, they would have done from the cohorts, they would have done some networking hopefully and
Absolutely.
met some other coaches, and obviously they know you guys and all that kind of stuff. How do you guys offer, like, is there tiers for this at all? Like, do you have like if people finish the program and they still want to keep that coaching relationship with you, what does that look like?
Anytime they want to join the full cohort, they're invited.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and well, and then too, I mean, we're still open to texts and emails, and it's amazing how many of them stay in contact. But that's the thing. I mean, we have when we do our full cohort, like the once a month thing, it's amazing how many people from 2, 3 years ago they're still jumping in and asking for advice and listening and that sort of thing. So yeah, so once you're a member, even though your 6 months is over, you're still part of the crew,
Yeah.
and you have that networking where you can contact us at any time. I got a girl a job at she was at University of Indianapolis, I think it was, and she was doing real well. And she wanted a job at another place. So the recommendations that we had and the things that we put forth for her, we were able to get her this other position. And again, that's what we do. We try to help people. One of the girls that I taught at my local gym helped her get a job at Duke University as an intern. You know, those things we like to help, kind of put at least open the door. They still have to have the talent to walk through the door and produce, but at least open the door. And that's what we're trying to do. Just open the door for as many people as we can.
Yeah. How's it been for you? I mean, this is kind of a tangent now from the mentoring program, but I really love that you're keeping those relationships alive, because again, that goes back to like doing the right thing at the right time for the right reasons, right? Like it is a relationship business, right? Being a coach, and if you can't live in the lane of relationships, then it might not be the right business for you.
Well, and that to me, that's a really important point that you're bringing up here because I'll do a course and I like the NSCA. Don't get me wrong, all right. But I have some people who, when they take some of the courses I teach, they'll have their CSCS from the NSCA, all right. Very smart men and women, and but they don't have trying to get them to understand the teaching part of it and the relationship part of it. It's not sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes I find that they don't have that skill just because they have their certification and they had the book learning and they know their sets and reps and they know the science behind it. I get that, it's really important, but some of them come out of that certification and they don't really know how to teach. They don't know how to get the point across of all the information that they have. It's one thing to have that knowledge there, but can you get the point across and really have the relationship with your athletes so that they really buy into all the things you're talking about? You can be the smartest person in the world, but if they don't buy into it, you're not going to be very successful.
Yeah, it is interesting because I think that where people enter from is often like a really deep reflection of how they lived their sports career, right? Like I was an addict. I trained, I mean, I literally trained until I broke stuff. Just as it was the regular,
Yeah.
I couldn't stop. I had to do it, right? And it was the same thing for, being out on the doing track and field stuff or for being in the weight room or whatever. Like I was a kid who you had to tell to stop, right?
Yeah.
And so when I started coaching, I thought what people wanted to know was the nuts and bolts of stuff. Like I made the same mistake that a lot of young coaches do, where they, I entered it thinking that everybody was like me. I thought everybody liked to do that, and then it turns out that kids that work that hard are kind of unicorns. They just don't show up that often. And so if all you're bringing is nuts and bolts to the table, and you don't have that athlete, then you're not gonna be as effective as you could be. So you gotta develop those other tools, but that's part of the process, right? Like that's part of the coaching growth, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And in addition to that, I think one of the things that coaches they know all the information and have a hard time getting the point across. I think sometimes they tend to overcomplicate things.
Mm-hmm.
And a really good coach to me can do just the opposite. They simplify things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Instead of explaining, like for instance, if I'm coaching an athlete, I'll try to use 2 or 3 words to explain what I want them to do. And I'll have another coach come in and he'll start talking and talking and talking, and it's like it goes in one ear and out the other. And so, I think what a good coach should do is take all that knowledge they have and be able to simplify it to just do a couple words so the athletes can really soak it in. Because if you try to say too many things, well, here's a story, a true story. I had a guy one time that I thought he was a really good weightlifting coach, but kind of wondered after this. Anyway, his lifter was at the chalk box getting ready for his third attempt snatch, and I knew the kid. He was a really really good kid. And but anyway, he was at the chalk box, and the coach was behind him, and he was rubbing his traps, and he's whispering in his ear, well, loud enough that I could hear him. And he was telling me like 20 different things to do. Do this and do that, and do that before he went out on the platform to do his lift. Well, the kid went out and made the lift in spite of that, I think. So anyway, so I saw the kid later on, and I didn't want to say anything in front of the coach. I didn't want to step on any toes or anything. But anyway, I knew the kid, so I asked him later. I said, man, I heard your coach giving you all these things to do before your last lift, and that was a really good lift. What are you thinking when he's telling you all these things? He said, "Are you kidding? I totally ignore him. I have no idea what he's saying." So my point here is that if you're saying too much, they're going to tune you out. If you keep it simplified, keep it real, just a few words, they'll soak it in and they'll go in, they'll buy it, they'll buy into it for you.
Yeah, and I think it's good not to forget what it's like to train. I mean, most of the coaches I know train too, so they understand. But like, when you get a few sets in, your brain doesn't work so good anymore. You're
No,
not going to be writing poetry and you
no,
know,
no,
and so
exactly.
if you go in and tell your athletes like, okay, we're gonna do this for the potentiation effect, and this is how it works, and all this kind of stuff, and they're already 3 sets in, they aren't gonna hear anything,
They'll be
right? They're just
snoring. They'll be
yeah,
snoring for you.
they're waiting for you to stop talking so they can do something, right?
Yeah,
So like,
yeah,
but if you say like, hey, we're gonna do some jumps before we do some heavy squats, it'll help. They'll
yeah,
do that, right?
yeah.
That's easy,
Just
right?
simple terms. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And then you
yeah.
get them all excited, and that's what you want. You want your athletes to be excited about what they're doing, but just don't overcomplicate things. I think sometimes, we just think too much. When I was lifting back in the day, all I would say is like, before I started the lift, tight, finish, two
Uh-huh.
words,
Uh-huh.
and that
Yeah.
they was just kind of my
No
mantra
first and
that
second
worked.
pull and catch
Yeah,
and all that kind of stuff, right? Just
yeah.
just sit tight and do it.
Make sure you do this. Make sure you do that. Make sure. Well, that doesn't work.
Yeah. And it's not that there's not appropriate times to share that information with athletes, right? But like it's not when they're in the heat of training, right? Like it's
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
it's the downtime. If they want to do the sense making later, like why did you make me squat why did you make me do a heavy single before we texted our vert? You can be like, okay, yeah, we can have that
This is
conversation.
why we did that. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But then, that's there's a different time and place though, right? To try to share information versus try to do work. They don't all overlap real well.
Well, and then and I think too, I think sometimes young coaches they expect the same trust that older coaches get because
Uh-huh.
the older coaches have kind of earned that trust. And so sometimes the younger coaches they don't get that right away, and it's almost like they try to force it on the athletes, you know what I mean? So I think sometimes, and I think women have a little difficulty with that too, because they deserve to be respected, but sometimes, especially if they're working with males, sometimes the males they don't want to hear it. And I know some really good women's coaches, and it's got to be a little bit more difficult for them, but they deserve the respect and the trust. And sometimes either that or even young coaches, they struggle a little bit with that, getting that. But
Hmm.
it takes time. The more you do it, the better you get at it.
Yeah, and it's also like that's another like, talk about like applying your craft with fidelity, right? Is when you go to coach a group of kids, some of them are going to latch onto you whether you want them to or not, and some of them are going to get tired of you talking before you finish introduce yourself, and they're going to take some more work, and it's going to be different for you than it is for the next coach who comes in, or the coach who was there before. So like you just you're going to have to expect that you're going to get a variety of responses from your athletes.
Sure.
uh that's just human nature.
And don't get your feelings hurt. And that's another thing. It's just like, especially young coaches, if they get an athlete that bucks them a little bit, they get their feelings hurt. It's like, wait a minute, I'm doing what's best for you. What's your problem? It's not
Uh-huh.
their problem. It's your problem to figure out what they're thinking and how to get across to them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and often those
don't get your feelings hurt. Stuff
yeah.
happens.
Yeah, and often those will be your most productive relationships. Like those are the universe telling you for free that you're not doing it right,
Yeah. What do you need to do to fix it? Yep.
right? Because
Yep.
it's ultimately it's our responsibility, right? It's not the yeah, yeah. Okay, so I wrote it down. You got Mark Henry stories for us?
Mark Henry he's one of my favorite people of all time. Okay.
Yeah.
When we had the Olympics in 1996, okay, I had known him from before. He was a really phenomenal power lifter when he was, I think, 18. He was, just lifting these huge weights, as a young guy. So he was a really good power lifter. And then he converted to weightlifting, and which, by the way, the term weightlifting, Olympic lifting, okay? We're not supposed to call it Olympic lifting, but we have to in this country because everybody in the world knows that weightlifting is snatch and clean and jerk. All
It's
right.
one of my greatest pet peeves is that we didn't do a better job naming things from the start. Powerlifting should be called weightlifting. Weightlifting should be called powerlifting. Like we
Thank
shouldn't
you.
have this
Thank
ambiguity.
you. Exactly. Exactly. Because I have to correct that all the time. But
Yeah, yeah.
weightlifting is snatch and clean and jerk. Around the world, everybody knows that. Where in our country, if you say you're a weightlifting coach, first thing you say, well, how much can you bench? Or
Not
they'll say, "Oh, you're that powerlifting guy." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, kind of." And then I explain to them, "Well, powerlifting is misnamed. It should be called strength lifting. What we do should be called powerlifting, but it's not."
right, right.
And then I have to explain. Anyway, so yeah, that terminology is kind of crazy. Anyway, he converted to weightlifting, and right off the bat, I mean, he was just, he was going to be the superstar. And he was. He won a couple national titles, made the Olympic team, this and that. I felt bad for him, though, because, he was just a huge, jovial guy. He was one of
Hmm.
the nicest people you'd ever want to meet. I'd be with him at different places, and he'd be picking up little kids and getting pictures taken, and just the nicest guy, right? But I felt bad for him because he had a picture in Sports Illustrated back in the day. And I remember him standing there holding a plate, and he was projected as being a medal contender in the heavyweight division. And everybody in the weightlifting world knew, like, he's going to have a really good day to even come close. I think he ended up ninth or 10th, which is still really good. Okay.
Hmm.
But it just way too much pressure that, he wasn't ready for that because he had really had enough time to become a good weightlifter. Like you said, you got to put in all that time. Still just a really, really good guy. And he did hurt his back a little bit I think it was his second snatch. He ended up this is the 96 Olympics in Atlanta, ended up finishing in, I think, again, ninth or 10th. Said he had a bad back. I don't know how bad his back was because when we went back to the dorms that we were, and then he and I and a couple others, we kind of went out to a dance club that night, and he was dancing pretty well. So his back didn't hurt him to dance. Maybe it hurt him to lift heavy weights. I don't
Uh-huh.
know, but he was good for that. But just a really, really good guy. I like Mark a lot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He seems like a sweet dude. I'd love to. I'm trying to track him down to get him on the show. I keep reaching out, but I haven't found a path
Oh,
yet.
he'd be
But
a great one on there for sure.
hmm, hmm.
Yeah, I mean, because is he still wrestling? Because he was Sexual Chocolate and or
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Chocolate
yeah.
Thunder. What I don't know what his name was, but
No, I haven't seen him wrestle for several years, I don't think. So
I don't watch that kind of wrestling. I watch like Penn State and Iowa and those guys. I watch that.
I watch it, and as often as it shows up in like reels or something when you're just scrolling, doom
Yeah,
scrolling. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Good guy though. Really, really good guy. Just a large human being.
And it's such a, like a rapid trajectory, right? Like to go from powerlifting to making it to the 96 Olympic team, like that all by itself is an insane turnaround.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think people in the know probably understand. But if you don't get that, converting from powerlifting to weightlifting, it's not the easiest thing
Hmm.
because even though you're very strong, obviously, you're not strong in the same positions you need to be when you're doing a snatch or a clean and jerk. And that's one of the things that Shane Hammond, I use him as an example. He was another one that converted from powerlifting to weightlifting, squatted 1,000 pounds.
Hmm.
We always kind of use the just in real general terms, whatever your squat is, you should be able to clean and jerk 80% of that or so. Well, according to that, he should clean and jerk 800 pounds, right? Which evidently is not going to happen. But the point here is that, we were able to figure out, okay, strength was not his issue. His issue was we need to get him doing snatch and clean and jerk more. So, yeah, he would squat maybe once a week, 7 or 800 pounds, just to keep it right. But
Hang on
his
to that
focus
800
was
pound squat.
snatch and clean and jerk. But a lot of times powerlifters, just because maybe they do sumo deadlifts rather than the regular deadlift. That's something else. Maybe they even if they do a regular deadlift, once the a deadlifter passes the knees, their lift is pretty much done. Where a weightlifter, once it passes your knees, you have to be in position. That's where your lift really gets started.
Hmm.
So the technique of the pull itself, the pull pattern is different. That changes things. A lot of times, powerlifters, because they've done a lot of upper body work with their benches and all, they tend to be very tight in the shoulders and the triceps and the lats.
And
So
getting those front
even
rack positions can be a
yeah,
challenge.
receiving the bar is pretty. Even overhead snatch, it's difficult or jerk. So it can be a problem. Now, I will say that Shane and Mark both they made a really pretty quick turnover
Mhm.
from powerlifting to Olympic lifting. So they should be given credit for that because that's not the easiest thing to do.
No, yeah, it's a big hill to climb those technical things. I actually just I've got a 14-year-old son. I've got three boys. My oldest is 14, and I just taught him how to do a clean on Saturday.
Well, how did he
Yeah.
do?
It was pretty good. So we only did, I think, like 95 pounds or something.
That's all right. How big
But
is he?
he's getting pretty tall. Like he's sneaking up on 6 feet tall, but he's in his baby giraffe era right now, so he weighs about 130 pounds.
That's a good way of
So
putting it. Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, he'll. Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe he might not fill out, but most everybody in my family is pretty stout, so I expect him to fill out a bit. But I went through the same phase. I looked like a skeleton when I was 14 years old. So
You never know.
yeah, yeah. But it was fun because, I talked to him about kind of the phases of the movement. And then when he went to do it, he tried going real hard just straight from the floor. And things were just falling apart and the bar was too far out in front of him. And I was like, just wait to start trying till it's at your knees. Like when you get past your knees, then hit it hard. And it was just smooth as silk. So it was just a funny, you know.
Yeah. We teach from the top down. We teach from that mid thigh like power position and get the idea of do it from there. And then if they do it from there, okay, then we move it down to the knees and then get that transition through the power position, and then go to the floor. I just find if you teach it from the floor, there's just too many things that can go wrong.
Yeah, yeah, which was almost exactly what happened, right? Like
Yeah.
as soon as he
Yeah.
started going, it was like that's why it rapidly became, just go from the knee, just hit
Yeah.
that hang clean position kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, it was quite a bit of fun to do. I've got my own little like 500 square foot weight room. I've just been collecting equipment over the last 12 years, but it's kind of a troll cave. And so I was telling him, I was like, if we ever get you to a real weightlifting gym, you'll have space. But here
Yeah.
you got about 3 feet, so don't die.
Hey, I got another story. You ready for this?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
When I first, and again, people may have heard this in other podcasts. I don't know. When I first got my first set of weights at York Barbell, when I was 12 years old, it was a 5 foot exercise bar. It wasn't an Olympic bar. It was an exercise bar, 100
Was
pounds.
it just 1 inch diameter all the way across, like no sleeves or anything, or did it have sleeves?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. And the only reason that I could make it spin, like to receive the bar, as if I had the collars loose so the plates spun. Okay. It's still okay.
Right.
Anyway, it was a 5 foot bar. And when I had to train like in my little apartment that we lived in. It was the second floor. I had reconverted this old clothes closet. I moved all kinds of stuff around, put down a slab of plywood, and the room was 6 feet left to right, 4 feet front to back. All right. I'm teaching my in a five with a 5 foot bar. I'm teaching myself how to snatch and clean and jerk with 6 inches on each side and 4 feet front to back. And based off of like sequence photos that we were in Strength and Health magazine, and I may have dropped the weight once or twice. Mom was not real happy with me, but again, that's how I taught myself.
Yeah, I can just see
Anyway,
that as a
so
recipe for some pretty good bruises, you know?
yeah. Well, and then when the weather was nice and warmer, we had this like old garage shed type thing, and I moved my stuff out there. Of course, I'm 12 years old. I'm dumb. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just kind of learning, and I just wanted to do it. But it was the dirt floor, so every time I dropped the weight, it would get deeper and deeper and deep. Next thing you
Deficit.
know, I'm doing deficit cleans and deficit snatches. I learned how to do deficit just on my own without anybody telling me how to do it. So
Uh,
again, trial and error stuff that takes me a while to figure out stuff. That's why coaching is so rewarding to me now, because I can just kind of take out those trial and error things when it may have taken me 6 months to figure out on my own what I was doing wrong. Where now I can look at somebody in 3 seconds and say, well, you just bent your arms too early or something like that. So that's what makes coaching really rewarding for me, because I've been through all that, and now I can help people kind of speed things up a little bit.
yeah, you'll probably appreciate this as like not making mistakes is when I started training, I was virtually uncoachable as a kid. Like I said, super obsessed about doing it, but when people told me, I thought I knew better than everybody else. And, I'd like to say that I've grown up a lot. I'm not sure I have. But my training was like really heavily influenced by the like kind of reference material I could get about Bondarchuk.
Oh yeah.
And I couldn't get good stuff. Like, I found quite a bit of resources, but it's somebody else's opinions or somebody else's version of the work that he was doing. It wasn't easy to get, like published, like actual stuff that he'd said and done and everything. And then, excuse me. And then so that was part of it, not really understanding what that system was and how much of the system was him. Like I think that's like a hurdle that a lot of people go through when they get into the world of training is they see, like Bondarchuk or West Side or the Bulgarian system or whatever, and they don't understand how much of that system is actually the man who's running it, like not just the theory, but the guy who's there watching and interacting with the athletes and stuff. So obviously I was missing that whole piece of the understanding. And so I was basically just like on this, continual ramp where I was, changing exercises every 6 weeks or whatever, and then trying to do these super long like transformation or peaking blocks that were like 12 weeks long or 16 weeks long that I didn't understand that, those blocks were designed for people who'd been training for 20 years and were on substances that I wasn't on, And so like, just talking about making those early mistakes of like, this guy ran the system and it was one of the most successful systems in the world. And he trained every, Olympic gold medalist in the hammer for like 30 years or whatever. And, you think like, I'm just going to do what he's doing and not understanding what all those little pieces are. The value of having a coach who's gone through stuff and can contextualize that stuff is huge.
Yeah, I think that you bring that up. And it's the most important part about everything has to be taken into context. Okay. Like the Bulgarians, for instance, and I've had some U.S. weightlifters to say, well, they were watching what the Bulgarians were doing, where all they would do was snatch, clean and jerk, and squat. And they were setting world records, and they would be doing 6 workouts in a day where they would do snatches up to world record, and then they take a little break, and then they clean and jerk up to world record. Then they take a little break, and then they squat really, really heavy. Then they take a little break, and then they come back and do the same thing in the afternoon. They do 6 workouts. Well, you got to understand the context that was all done within, and you can't necessarily apply that to what we're all about because, for instance, well, first of all, you can't do that type of training without drugs. Okay, we're not going to do drugs, and you got to understand that those lifters, they had already been through their 10,000 hours of training leading up to that. They had set the foundation of training and worked their way up. They were only the elite guys that were doing that. Plus, they were in a culture that, hey, at that level, if somebody gets hurt, which a lot of them did, if somebody gets hurt, it's like, okay, next, let's move on to the next one. They didn't, it just didn't matter. So, and they only did it at a certain time of the year. They didn't do it year round. So, everything has to be taken into context. This is why I urge coaches not necessarily to study the details of the whatever system it was, but understand the conceptual ideas behind it. Okay, what was the thought process in it? Not necessarily the details exactly how it did it, but why they were doing it and what was the idea behind it. Okay, and so my first real big influence was on periodization, theory and methodology of training by Tudor Bompa. That was, well, the story behind that is that I got kind of ridiculed by people. We were sitting at the beach, and my wife is reading a trashy novel, and I'm reading, Tudor Bompa's theory and methodology of training, sitting under the umbrella, listen, watching the ocean. And my daughter says, "Why don't you read something a little bit more interesting?" I go, "This is interesting to me."
Yeah,
But, just understanding the concepts behind it and why things are done, not necessarily applying it specifically, but taking those concepts and applying it to what actually will work in our setup.
yeah, yeah, and I think that there's a lot of value in that outlook because, like, if we look at like the Bulgarian method, like we had Max Ada on the show, and Max talked about going and training with the Bulgarians, and he said that what they don't tell you is that they've got a whole system for avoiding work, like the athletes do. They'll load their barbell unequally so that the coach can't see that you're not lifting the amount of weight that you're supposed to be lifting or whatever, right? So
That's
they
the
got
first I heard that.
yeah, yeah. So they have this whole, so they call it crush code. They got this whole system for, like, taking their foot off the gas when they need to take a break. So they have their own kind of auto regulation thing that's built in there that's not in any of the literature, right? So, like,
Yeah,
unless you are talking to somebody who's been there and done it, you don't
right.
know that that's a piece of
Exactly.
it. And like you were
That's
talking,
interesting. I'd never heard of that before. That's cool.
yeah, yeah, yeah. If you get a chance to pick Max's brain about it, he likes
Max has got some stories, that's for sure.
telling. But I don't think it was the Bulgarian team. I think I was looking at the Russian hockey team. But like the I think the moral still holds because the Russian hockey team, like, before the fall of the USSR, their athletes only had a tenure on the team, averaged like 7 months or something like that. So like you were talking about people getting pushed out when they couldn't make it. So there was a few guys who were there a long time, but that still only managed to bring the average up to like 7 to 9 months because most of them they couldn't survive the kind of intense volume of training that they were supposed to be doing, and they didn't care because it was a system. So they'd if somebody got broken, they'd send them out and bring somebody else in, and
Yeah,
so yeah, like that context is always huge.
yeah,
And it is humbling as a coach when you find out how poorly you understood something. Like when you were trying to implement something and thought like, "Hey, I'm taking these from this guy and I'm going to do the whole thing," and then you, like, as you get into it and it's not working and you're running into hurdles and you have struggles, and then you talk to somebody who is, a part of the program or a coach himself, and you find out like, "Oh, I was missing 20% of what we were supposed to be doing or not doing," or whatever. Like it's an experience. Well, Coach, I know it's getting late where you're at, and I've had you for hour 15. Where can people find you at? If they're interested in the mentorship program, if they're interested in coaching, where should they go to find out more?
it's really easy. My website is where everything is as far as signing up and finding out more information. And it's simply tottentraining.com.
That's
And
it.
we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or X, whatever it's called now. And that's at Totten Training. And anytime, any questions or anything, please feel free to contact me. And, my information is out there. And even my email is leo@tottentraining.com. Try to keep it as simple as possible. I'm a simple guy. I try I try not to make things too complicated, and so it's just basically very easy to get in touch with me. So just whatever we can do to help. That's why we're here.
Yeah. And I strongly encourage people, like, I genuinely believe you mean it when you say reach out, right? Like, that's what this sport, we love doing this stuff. That's why we're so involved in it, right? So if you're
Well,
looking to
and it
grow,
and it always gets me when people say, "Well, I hate to bother you, but it's not bothering me at
yeah,
all."
yeah. Yeah.
You know,
It's literally what I love doing.
yeah. Yeah, and if it was bothering me, I would tell you. But for the most part, I mean, if you harass me, that's something different. But no, I mean, anytime I don't mind at all. Don't say, I hate to bother you because it's not at all.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on. If you're interested in the program, check it out. It sounds really cool. Again, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, Kyle.